The interesting thing about self-storage and the 40 years of like recorded history is that it's a steady raise. Like when you look at it, it's market almost unaffected. I don't recall bulletproof. I hate to use that word, but the thing about the interesting thing about self-storage is that the clients are so diverse. You have mom and pop downsizing, you have contractors, you have people storing files, you have, stores storing overflow of goods, you have contractors, like you have all these different people. So what happens is when the market, in a bull market, you have all these people storing goods. And then in a bear market, you have the contractors start to disappear, but you have people downsizing and their household goods go up. So there's always a use for it. Right. So therefore, just across the board, you generally have 90 plus 95% occupancy in every single market. Yeah. And that's what's crazy about self-storage. You can't say that about a lot. You certainly can't say it about office. You certainly can't say it about retail.
Yeah.
Maybe you can say that in some cases in apartments and in certain markets, but self-storage is one of those really weird industries, and it's weird in a good way. Yeah, it really depends, Matt, on whether or not they require variance or approval to get full entitlement. So you got to realize probably 80% of the stuff we're purchasing is completely off market. And a lot of the stuff isn't even approved for self-storage. It's kind of like our secret sauce is that we're not afraid to take something down that requires rezoning or approval for self-storage, because that a lot of times that's the stuff where we increase value big time, because we're moving into a market or an area or a zone that's not already self-storage. And that's what's actually creating the ability for us to make a better valuable piece, because it's in a downtown area or it's somewhere that's different than where self-storage typically would go. So I'm Italian, so dinner table was like seriously important for us growing up as a kid. Dinner table for me was my grandmother was kind of like my almost like my surrogate mother. Not that I didn't have an amazing mother, I did, but my parents were divorced when I was really, really young. So I was at my mom's house during the week, my dad's house during the weekend. And for me, my big dinner table was Sunday gravy, was Sunday afternoon. My grandmother would always cook and spend all day in the kitchen. And then we would spend what felt like 6 hours eating dinner. And it would be like, my fairly extended family around a Sunday afternoon dinner table. And, those were probably my favorite memories of my family as a kid growing up. And that's actually something that I kind of try to emulate to this day is, keeping my family close and having dinner. And dinners are really, really important to my family. So that's kind of one of my favorite questions ever asked on a podcast.
Oh, see, there you go. It's starting up strong.
Yeah.
Cool. So what's like a standout dish, something you remember your grandmother making, like, I can't wait to have that. Anything stand out to you?
Yeah, again, she was right off the boat from Sicily, and so was my grandfather that side. So it was really just, it was Sunday gravy. She would make homemade pasta. She would make braciole. She'd make meatballs, Italian sausage. And so I really do a very, very similar dish nowadays, especially in the winter. New Jersey, it's freezing cold.
Yeah,
I don't do it generally in the summer very often, but as soon as the fall comes around, all the way to April or May, I'll do that same thing, and we do it at least probably once a month. So
I love it.
That's my dish. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So, strong family values, any entrepreneurial experience or exposure when you were a kid at all, or did that kind of strike you a little bit later on in life after you'd gone through a few things?
Yeah, very little. I mean, my dad was the first entrepreneur in my family. And when I was growing up, he had he kind of, very similar to me. He went to like I believe it was like one semester or 1 year of community college, and like that's enough for me. And he went out and started a drywall company, and so all the way up until like my teenage years, he was a drywall guy and he had a drywall company, and then he started like branching off and doing general contracting and building houses and stuff like that. And so I looked up at him and I said to myself, like I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I took a little bit of a different direction. I went in the military first, but like I always knew like somehow, some way was going to end up in construction. I was going to end up, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And so he was really the only person that I knew growing up that was in business, that had their own business. And, he was my idol.
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
person I wanted to emulate when I got out, out of the military and started my own thing.
Very cool. Very cool. So you went off to the military. What did you have any kind of a focus or anything? Did they stick you in any type of like specific, specific area or focus?
They tried. So it's a very kind of an interesting story. I don't know how detailed I can get on a podcast actually, but so put it to you this way. I was working for my dad at the time. I actually went to one semester of community college trying to kind of find my path. And I
Yeah.
decided like this is the way to do it. At the same time, I was working for my dad as a general contractor, and my foreman at the time who was working for my dad was a retired reservist senior chief in the Navy.
Mhm.
And he was a CB. A lot of people don't know what CBs are. CBs are the construction battalions of the Navy. They're actually builders in the Navy. They don't go on ships. They go everywhere by air, and they build.
Wow.
They do construction on ground,
Okay.
on land. And so he was kind of like another kind of role model for me. And he said, you can go do construction and be in the military. And I always had this calling to serve my country. I always wanted to kind of
Mhm.
be in the military, serve my country. And I never understood how. And first I thought maybe I wanted to be a Marine. And, I've always loved, kind of shooting guns. And I thought, I'll go out and I'll be on the front lines and,
Mhm.
that type of thing. And, Dave, his name was like, you can do construction and serve in the Navy. And I said, how do I do that? So I actually went into what they call a delayed entry program, which is, you kind of pick a specialty and you start kind of training with the Navy guys and doing PT and running with them and stuff like that. And they kind of snuck me into MEPS, which is the Military Processing Center. Before
Okay.
I knew it, they had sworn me in, right? Like I'm standing there with my right hand up, and they
Yeah.
were like, "Let's go in this other room," and they sat me down at the conference table, and it was like this wear you out kind of situation where I was sitting there
Mhm.
for so many hours, and they're like, "Look, kid, let's just pick a rate or specialty. Let's pick a rate. What do you want to do?" And before I known it, they like talked me into being a helicopter mechanic.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
I came home that next day and I was like, I'm a helicopter mechanic. And Dave was like, absolutely not. You're not about, you're going to be a CB. You went in there and told him you're going to be a CB. Long story short, without getting into a lot of detail, that probably get me in trouble. I got into like a little bit of a pissing match with my recruiter. And I told him I'm not showing up and we're going to call the police on you, this whole thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
they ended up going back and getting me the rate that I wanted to. I ended up going in as a CB. I wanted to be an equipment operator, but I ended up becoming a builder.
Yeah.
And long story short, I ended up getting what I wanted. But it was an amazing career. I spent 6 years doing what I love, doing construction,
Mhm.
traveling around the world. Ended up serving 2 presidents at Camp David. I had an amazing career. I'm so grateful for the people I
Very
met, the
cool.
things I got to do, and just had a great career.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And congratulations. I also am a community college dropout myself. I think I lasted maybe a semester or two. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know the feeling there. But so what happened next? You got out of the being a CB and what was your next move? What would you jump
Yeah.
into?
At first, I jumped into being a construction project manager down in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years. Had a great job down there doing it for the government, and probably would have spent better part of my career down there, except I met my wife, who was from New Jersey,
Uh,
and I always joke that her umbilical cord has never been cut. So she comes down to live with me in DC, and we would spend every single weekend driving back to New Jersey to visit her
uh,
parents and her horses at the time. And so that lasted about 6 months, and then I ended up back in New Jersey. I ended up getting
mhm.
pulled back into a state that I never thought I'd live in again. Um, but it was for the best because we ended up back here, and almost immediately I got into flipping real estate. I got into starting my own business, and fast forward 15 years, and doing okay.
Yeah, very cool. And so were you flipping like single family homes and all of that? Was that kind of the primary focus? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, we started out flipping single families for about the first 12 years. We flipped nothing but single families. I did just about everything you can do in real estate, single family world and brokerage. I owned a brokerage. I did BPOs. I did single family rentals. I did apartment complexes, office, retail. And then about 3 years ago, we did a major pivot. We went into self-storage development and
mhm.
kind of never looked back. Now we still have a lot of single families. We still have that portfolio. We're kind of liquidating a little bit at a time, but now we're all in self-storage development.
Yeah, that's so you actually develop
Amazing.
it then too.
Yeah, we build it from mostly ground up. We do some restructure of like darkened Kmart's and Sears, like some big
Mhm.
box stuff, but mostly it's ground up development work.
Very cool, very cool. So how do you go about establishing, this is a great place, or this is a good piece of land to be able to buy and put a storage unit on there? Is there a process to determine that? Like how many people are around there, or how
Yeah.
many competitors are around there?
I'll tell you a funny story, Matt. So when I first got into this, one of my mentors in the business, I flew out to Colorado, and this is a guy who's built over 300 self storage facilities, and
Mhm.
he said to me, Joe, you could take a map of the United States and throw a dart at it and successfully build a self storage right there.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's the industry right now that we're in. It's amazing, right? But that doesn't mean you want to. That doesn't mean you
Yeah.
should or you want to or any of that kind of good stuff, right? So our idea behind it is like okay, yeah, you could do that, but you don't want to do that, right? So let's try to find the best 10% of areas in the
Mhm.
country to build that. So what we're looking for is we're looking for expanding MSAs. I'm looking for places that have multiple different great industries in them. I'm looking for
Mhm.
places that are growing demographics. We're trying to find places that are obviously densely populated, income levels that are north of 50, $60,000 on average.
Mhm.
And then, of course, it goes into feasibility of what's the saturation in the area as far
Yeah.
as what are the competitors in the area and what do they look like and what do they offer and all that kind of good stuff. And it gets fairly detailed when you start to boil it down. But the interesting thing about the industry is you're not just this industry, obviously. If you're going to build a mall or you're going to build
Mhm.
an apartment complex or anything like that, commercial is so much different than single family.
Yeah.
You're not speculating. You're getting 25 different opinions of, is this a good place to put a facility? And you're getting all these different people saying, yeah, thumbs up, good job, let's go, this is a good
Yeah.
place to do it. It's not just it's not like Joe decides, let's go build a $20 million facility and then
Right.
I go raise the
Right.
capital and do it. No, I mean, it's literally 12, 14, 15, 20 different people saying, yes, I've looked at this, I've looked at the area, I've looked at the demographics, and this is a good spot.
Mhm. Mhm. That makes perfect sense. What's the largest complex that you've built so far, would you say?
So we only build Class A facilities, and that means they're going to be north of 80,000 square feet.
Oh,
Average
wow.
site is usually 100,000 square foot, and that's net rentable square foot. So that might be 115,000, and we could rent 100,000 of it.
Uh-huh. Wow. Wow. So, and do these facilities have like, so we invest in large multifamily, so similar but different, obviously. Are there amenities that you package into these at all? And I'm just asking because I don't
Yeah,
know that business whatsoever, but
yeah.
is there like, like a coffee bar or something like that? Or is that like included in Class A, or is that
Uh,
not what Class A, is?
here's what I love about the self storage industry, right? It's concrete, steel, asphalt, right?
Mhm.
We're building metal boxes. Like I always tell people, there's nothing sexy about it, right? Like
Yeah.
you guys have a Class A apartment facility, you might have, a swimming pool or a playground or a sauna or I don't even know, a hot tub or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
we're talking Class A means that it's a secure facility. It probably offers most likely it offers climate control.
Mhm.
It might have certain types of accessibility. It's obviously got elevator service. Like it's a nice structure. It's generally well lit, and it's got security cameras and things like that. It's a place that it's not down an industrial road, and,
Yeah.
and it makes you feel safe when you pull into it. And it's big enough to be considered Class A, right? Like it's not a 20,000 square foot site,
Yeah.
um, and it's new, and it's clean. But no, it's there. Aside from the fact that some sites now that we're developing, it's interesting. Kind of as a side note, the industry is making a big shift, right? People want self storage to be more in a commercial district. They want it more
Mhm.
downtown. They want it off of Main Street. I kind of mentioned like a lot of places used to be like industrial parks and like off of the beaten path and down the dirt road. People want it more accessible nowadays, and that's
Mhm.
why you're starting to see self storage start to take over where dark and big box were. Where your old Sears was. Well,
Yeah.
Sears was on Main Street, right? Sears wasn't down the dirt road. So when you convert that to a self storage, now all of a sudden it's accessible and it's right off the highway.
Yeah.
And so that becomes, a highly accessible site, and it's very safe and secure, and people are, they'd rather access it right there. Um, that's a change that's happening. And so what's happening now is, in order to kind of give and take with the zoning boards and the zoning offices, a lot of times to get approval to go in those areas, we're also mixing in some retail. So you're seeing a lot of self-storages where they're getting like storefront, self-storage behind it. So to kind of answer the question you're saying, like your answer is like, is it class A if it has amenity? Well, amenity might be there's some storefronts attached to it, but that doesn't really pertain to the self-storage itself.
No, that makes sense. And that's interesting. I'd never really considered that at all. I mean, when you were describing all of that, I'm, picturing here's an old mall and you wipe that all out. And then, now there's a self-storage there, but that makes perfect sense, building in, more retail spaces into that. How did the self-storage industry fare through, what we just went through with the COVID and, pandemic and all of that? Was it pretty well, pandemic proof, I guess?
2021 was the best year in recorded history for self-storage.
Wow.
Yeah. Like they said something like, and this stat that I'm quoting is from like October, $9 billion in self-storage changed hands up until October. There were the lowest amount of vacancy rates ever recorded and the highest amount of per square foot rental rates ever recorded. And that's from the top like 4 REITs. That was like a Marcus and Millichap study was reported. The interesting thing about self-storage and the 40 years of like recorded history is that it's a steady raise. Like when you look at it, it's market almost unaffected. I don't want to call it bulletproof. I hate to use that word, but the thing about the interesting thing about self-storage is that the clients are so diverse. You have mom and pop downsizing, you have contractors, you have people storing files, you have, stores storing overflow of goods, you have contractors, like you have all these different people. So what happens is when the market, in a bull market, you have all these people storing goods. And then in a bear market, you have the contractors start to disappear, but you have people downsizing and their household goods go up. So there's always a use for it. Right. So therefore, just across the board, you generally have 90 plus 95% occupancy in every single market. Yeah. And that's what's crazy about self-storage. You can't say that about a lot. You certainly can't say it about office. You certainly can't say it about retail.
Yeah.
Maybe you can say that in some cases in apartments and in certain markets, but self-storage is one of those really weird industries, and it's weird in a good way.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if I wanted to get involved in self-storage, what would be the way to start down that path? Like I want to go down the exact same path where you went, I want to build it and own it. What would be some advice that you would give someone in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, my advice would be get involved with someone who's doing it, unless you have, we had decades of construction development experience. I mean, I jumped in 2 feet, because I was super confident of our abilities and our team and the people we had surrounding us. If you have development experience, go for it. If you think you're capable, go for it. If you're not, there's so many other ways, right? If you're an accredited investor, there's syndicated deals you can get involved in. If you're somebody who is capable of finding deals, I mean, we've trained multiple people. We actually train what we call certified field agents, right? Certified field agents, it's kind of like a glorified bird dog. We've trained people how to find deals for us. That just in the last 12 months, we've had 3 people get paid, tens of thousands of dollars in cash plus equity to go locate deals for us, right? So, and these are people that were like, part-time bankers, and one guy was an engineer, one guy was a banker. I'm trying to think. The third guy was actually a commercial broker, got paid to find us a deal. Yeah. So you can get paid to find deals. You can get paid to joint venture deals. You can get paid to be part of them in a myriad of different ways. But if you have development experience, go for it. I think it's an easy. I don't want to say it's easy. Nothing's easy, right? But I think it's if you're in multifamily, for example, it's definitely a transition that can be made. It's something that I think a lot of people overlook. Again, I always say it's overlooked because it's not sexy, right? But the numbers are really sexy, right? You're building something where you can build it at probably 60% or less of what it costs you to build a multifamily. And
sure,
the income is crazy similar. It's unbelievable.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And are you building this all, all over the country as well? Are you, focused? Would you advise focusing in on a specific area, or do you pretty well go anywhere, wherever there's land or the opportunity?
Yeah, so us personally, I mean, we're in 6 different states, but anywhere from we're like from Texas all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, but that doesn't
Mhm.
mean that we're not open to opportunities. Right now, it's just a matter of how far I want to go take a plane ride.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
there are opportunities all over. I mean, we're already looking at deals in Colorado and Utah and some in California. It's
yeah,
just a matter of how far I want to fly. I mean, there are opportunities all over the country, and there are certainly smart people, smart developers that are looking in all areas. Again, there's opportunities to wholesale land. There's just so many different plays to get involved in this industry right now.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
it's a really crazy time.
Yeah, I was curious, and I mean that's what I was expecting. But like in multifamily, you want to know the areas, and you understand, the different demographics in the areas. Which, obviously you went over all of those things. But I guess the other thing is too, the management teams aren't nearly as involved in storage units as what they are in multifamily as well. So like us, we're looking to build that out, and we want to try to keep kind of a core core business, if you will, where we can kind of keep adding out from there. Which I
Yeah,
guess with you guys, it's you can drop one in here and then go 1,000 miles away and drop one over there if you want. So yeah, that
yeah.
I like that. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I look at us as a pure developer. One of the reasons we build these larger facilities is we're working with the bigger management teams like CubeSmart, Extra Space, and Life
Mhm.
Storage, and so these guys are all nationwide, and we're actually using them to help us decide what's a good site before we
Ah,
ever put it under contract. So they're going to
yeah,
tell us like, hey, we have 15 sites within a 10, 15-mile radius, and this one's performing well, and this one ramped up in 9 months, and this one so they can tell saturation levels, and they can tell how quick a ramp up is going to take. And, they're basically giving us their opinion of a site before we ever, put it under contract or ever go
yeah.
through due diligence, which is super helpful because I don't want to be in the management business.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the groups that you were talking about earlier that, gave the check off on that particular site. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. Love that.
Yeah.
Um, so what you also have Legacy Builder, correct? Talk a little bit about that. What do you guys do there?
It's Legacy Builder Executive Coach. So Legacy Developers is actually our development team that does the self storage, and then Legacy
Okay.
Builder Executive Coaching really has two wings. We have the Storage Syndicate, which is basically a mastermind that teaches people how to develop storage and get involved in a myriad of different ways. Like we said earlier, whether you're an accredited investor that just wants to kind of learn the industry better and figure out what's a good play to get invested, financially, or
Mhm.
you want to be a joint venture operator, or you want to learn how to, physically develop your own site from ground up, or you want to learn how to syndicate deals. The coaching side does that, and I do a lot of one-on-one coaching with business owners that really, primarily business owners that want to learn how to diversify into real estate. So I have a
Mhm.
lot of doctors and attorneys and insurance broker clients that they make a lot of money and they work their butts off, and they just don't know how to find their way into something that makes sense outside of the
Yeah.
real estate market, outside of the excuse me, the stock market.
Yep. 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 That makes perfect sense. So talk a little bit about like what is the training look like? Is it Zoom calls, classes? How long does it take to get through it? What would someone expect to experience if they went through that process with you?
Yeah, inside the storage syndicate, it's super interesting. I don't know a lot of people that do it this way, but we actually do live calls each week with my executive team members. So
Mm-hmm.
what it is it's 3 calls each week, and they lock in with my business partner, developer, my chief executive, my chief operating officer, my acquisitions guy, my chief negotiator, my chief
Mm-hmm.
development officer. So it's people in my team that are day to day doing this, constructing these projects, finding these projects, negotiating the deals, putting together the construction contracts, myself putting together the team. So it's team building. It's just about every compartmental piece that you could think of.
Mm-hmm.
My chief investment officer syndicating the deals and raising the financing and dealing with the accredited investors and that whole process. So each week they're doing live calls with Q&A. and they're dialing into that piece. And then 4 times a year we do events. 2 of those events are virtual. 2 of those events are in person. So, if they don't want to fly out and they don't want to, tap into us live, they can, just as easily get the recordings or, do it virtually. And that's all inclusive as a part of the mastermind. And so there's a small initiation fee, and it's $1,000 a month to be part of that group. And we actually allow their whole executive team to tap into that. So if it's a small business, it's the owner and their partners and their executive team all have access to that. So, if they're trying to take a wholesale company, for example, or a real estate fix and flip company, and you want to transition into the storage business, we're basically giving them the whole business in a box so they can learn how to do that and make that transition happen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. I love that. What are some mistakes that you've seen, or maybe even you've made in the storage business? I mean, is it, choosing the wrong land, or, I mean, is there something else that can go wrong in that process?
Yeah, I wouldn't say mistake. I think that's what due diligence is for. Mistakes, not necessarily. I mean, I definitely lost money in due diligence. I think the problem, I wouldn't say necessarily a problem, but an issue that arises is that you're going to do due diligence and it's a risk. So, there's a myriad of deals. I tell people, for every deal that I bring an accredited investor that I bring to our team, we probably say no to 30 to 50 deals, right? And out of those 30 to 50 deals, we may have started to invest design and due diligence into 10 of those deals, for example, right? So, we have feasibility studies started. We have, maybe phase 1, we have environmental, we have surveys before we find out that, hey, there was an underground tank, or, used to be a gas station on this property, or, God knows what. I had a deal about 2 or 3 months ago, and man, we thought we were going to closing. What an amazing property. And it turned out to be underground contaminants that, was a site that had been there for a long, long time. And I mean, it was a super clean site. It was a reconditioned 80,000 square foot warehouse that had a lease in place for a long, long time. And it was immaculate. And it turned out that they think after phase 2 that they were pouring contaminants down the drain.
Oh my God. Wow.
We had to walk away from it, and we had probably 60, 70 grand invested in that deal. And, you're not going to get that money back. So there's risk to doing this. The reality of it is that that's cost of doing business. I think that people don't think about that kind of stuff, but the reality of it is it's the cost of doing business. It's not like you're going to get into this thing and do it for free, but you also, you're going to make a lot of money when you do it right, and you find the right deals, and you put one foot in front of the other, and you keep going. So, there's upside to the downside, definitely.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that there's a lot of mistakes that have been made. I think that, I think we're learning every single day. I tell people all the time, like construction, they're like, what's the risk? Well, we're problem solvers. That's all. Like if you're a problem solver, you mitigate risk. If you hide from problems, there's going to be all kinds of risk all day, every day. My team, that's all we do is solve problems. That's all we do. Every single day there's weather conditions, there's material delays, there's challenges, there's labor problems. Like you got to solve problems. And so the more you solve problems, the less the risk is constantly in your face.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you go through and, buy the material, is there like self-storage packages that someone's already pre-making, or is it, you're buying all of the, all of the I-beams, and you're putting up, the raw structure, and then kind of, building or framing in from there? I'm just curious if it's kind of like buying a standard box full of materials, or do you go through the whole design build process and you actually, design that specific unit around or in that lot or that parcel?
Yeah, it's kind of a little of each. It's like a blend. And so I'll explain it this way. We design exactly what we want. Our architectural team will literally build the blueprint of what we want, and then our box builder, basically the guy who does all the metal work, will almost prefab off-site the metal that he needs, and then he delivers exactly almost like Lincoln Logs. It comes cut and ready. But it's a pre-designed building. It's not like a Butler building or like a barn or something like that. It's made to order for our site, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Yeah. And I guess that's what I was getting at. I wasn't sure if there was, if it was more of a, a prefab type situation where, again, they're cutting it
No,
all. And
because the best way to maximize for every site is really to put the footprint of what you need.
yeah.
For that site. And so we're always trying to value engineer, like what's the best use for what the area can demand and what the
Mhm.
site can accommodate at the same, if that makes sense. So, it's never like the site is 100,000. It's like it might be 105,000 square foot because that's the unit mix that the site can carry.
Yeah.
And based on the turning radiuses and everything else that we can put on that site. So, that being said, the buildings are never, an exact, 100 by 100 or whatever. They're always some weird shape.
Mhm. What are some of the, like, I mean, you mentioned before some of the things that are put in a typical, self-storage, files and contractor needs and all of that. Are you guys also like storing boats and RVs and all that kind of stuff at some of the facilities as well? Is that a growing thing that you're definitely seeing a lot of people getting more vehicles, more toys, and they need a place to be able to put them?
Toys is a huge influx. We're starting to see in a lot of our sites. In fact, the one that we just did the full design on in San Antonio, Texas. We have a lot of Texas sites in the pipeline right now, and a lot of them are getting the same thing. We call it XXL, which is like a don't quote me on this, whoever's listening, but I think they're 20 by 45 or something. They're just huge. They're just a huge garage bay. And essentially it's made for an RV to pull into. I mean, the RV world is just gone nuts. I mean, as you know.
Yeah.
And so like toy bays are just, they're in huge demand right now. And so a lot of our sites we're actually accommodating these excess size bays, and we're charging a crazy premium for them because people want to be able to, pull in, plug in, have a heated bay, be able to put their toy in there, and then know that like they don't have to unload it.
Yeah.
It's all their stuff is in there. If they want to go for a trip, they just literally roll up the garage door and pull out. So, yeah, there's definitely a very large demand for those, and especially in certain areas. The one in New York, we're doing the same thing with. There's definitely that happening more and more. And in certain areas, we're actually catering entire sites to that. We're actually looking at potentially spinning entire sites over to that type of unit.
Yeah. Interesting. What about, I mean, you've touched on it a couple of times before, accredited investors. If they wanted to get involved, in one of your projects, what would be the best way for them? Obviously you've got the person who wants to be involved, the owner operator, if you will. What about the investor? Is there training or material available for them to realize, what their potential returns could be on an opportunity?
Yeah, we're not really good at this, but if they go to investwithlegacy.com. When I say we're not very good at this, we don't generally update the site fast enough because when we put our new release investment packages out to our existing investors, and a lot of times they get gobbled up before we have to put them back on our website. But anytime anybody wants to get involved in those sites, they can go to that website and they can just put in a request for information. I'll actually reach out to them personally. And have a conversation about upcoming deals that are in the pipeline.
Yeah. And typically, how long does that process take from, identification, and assuming that one passes all of the phase ones and all of that? How long does the process typically take from, again, identification to, final funding and then final build or occupancy permit, I guess?
Yeah, it really depends, Matt, on whether or not they require variance or approval to get full entitlement. So you got to realize probably 80% of the stuff we're purchasing is completely off market. And a lot of the stuff isn't even approved for self-storage. It's kind of like our secret sauce is that we're not afraid to take something down that requires rezoning or approval for self-storage, because that a lot of times that's the stuff where we increase value big time, because we're moving into a market or an area or a zone that's not already self-storage, and that's what's actually creating the ability for us to make a better valuable piece, because it's in a downtown area or it's somewhere that's different than where self-storage typically would go. That being said, if it's one of those types of places, we're doing one in Florida right now, which we put under contract, I think, in probably October or September. And we just got word this morning that the hearing is going to be in April, for example. So
wow.
you're probably talking 9 months from concept to closing.
Yeah.
But if it's an approved site, it could be as quick as 90 days to 120 days from concept to closing. So it really varies. Generally, once we close a site, I always tell investors, if it's a piece of raw land, expect 4 to 6 months from closing to actually putting a shovel in the ground, because even with approval and the fact that we have an entitled piece of ground and it's ready to go, we're still getting, we're at like 90 to 95% design at that point. That means that we're 95% sure what we're going to build, but we might move a wall, we might retweak the interior design. Then you have to get the mechanical guys to decide where the ductwork's going to go and all this kind of like little jazz inside. And quite frankly, it's pretty boring for that next 4 months. The design guys are playing around with where the stuff's going to go and everything. So you take the deal down, you have the land, now you have all this approvals, now you're submitting all the drawings to the township. Keep in mind, at that point, it's approved. You're building a self-storage, but now you have to get the township to like sign off on everything and check back, and the engineer gives the back and forth. And so there's all this stuff that happens after closing, and it can't happen until after closing. And that generally takes 4 or 5 months before we can even then you have to get all that approved so that you can go to bid and get the general contractor to give you the bid back and forth. So all that paperwork and stuff generally takes between 4 and 5 months, but then we have shovels in the ground and we're rocking.
Yeah, cool. Very cool. And I'm assuming that you probably have run into situations too, where you found a piece of land, and maybe it didn't get past that. Well, it made it, let's say it makes it past all the phase ones and all of the regular inspections, but the city won't give you zoning for storage units. Has that ever happened where the city has basically said, no, you can't build that, in that location? Yeah. And do they give any kind of reason why they wouldn't let that? I mean, is there a common reason why they don't want that there?
In my experience, and this has happened multiple times in my lifetime, and not just for storage, it's happened to me for housing, it's happened for multiple crop. In my experience, and a lot of developers, I'm sure will tell you the same thing. When that happens, it's because the neighbors complain, right? So neighbors have a bug in there, for whatever reason. And, a lot of times it's not because they don't want necessarily storage, it's because they don't want anything. I just had a zoning hearing get denied about a year ago in our own backyard down the street from our office. We were trying to convert an old dilapidated warehouse and put a brand new self-storage up there. And, there was a couple houses nearby. And by the way, in a commercial district, zoned, approved, almost a by right. It really was a by right development. But it was in an overlay where it was in a historic district, which required the zoning office to give it approval. So, not that it needed a variance or any of that kind of stuff. It just required a hearing. Well, during the hearing, the 2 or 3 houses that were in this commercial district, which, all intents and purposes really didn't even belong there. They made a big stink out of how this new development was going to, shed water onto their property, which is completely ridiculous because we would have needed underground water retainage anyway. Anyway, we got shot down because they pissed and moaned that we were building a new storage facility there. So, it happens. And, unfortunately, at that level, you got quite a bit of dollars invested in design and attorney's fees and everything else. And then you get a resident who isn't happy with it and it gets shot down. So, again, it's nature. It's par for the course. And, I think anybody who wants to get into this game has to realize that those are the costs of doing business.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Happens.
So if someone wanted to learn more on any of this, you mentioned that, the investors could reach out to you. What would be the best way to reach out and get in touch with you if they're, again, a person looking to be the owner operator or an investor? Any best ways to be able to get in touch?
Yeah, listen, I think if they're interested in being an investor with us, they can go to investwithlegacy.com. If they're interested in the storage syndicate and they want to get involved in the mastermind and learn more about actually developing or becoming, a joint venture partner or anything like that, they can go to legacybuilder.coach, which is our coaching wing and our mastermind group side.
Excellent. Joe, this is fantastic. we've kicked around doing self-storage for many years, and maybe one of these times we'll actually jump into it. And I love that you're basically giving away the secret sauce there, so that we don't have to go and bang our head against the walls and learn as we go. So that's fantastic. So many thanks, and I look forward to potentially connecting with you again in the future.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for having me on.